Hi, and welcome to this new section on Java classes and objects. In the previous section, you would have got an understanding of control statements, and I hope you have completed all the hands-on exercises. If you are not, then please pause this video, go to the previous section, complete all the exercises, and come to this section. I hope you are with me and you are enjoying the course. Okay. So in this course or in this section, we will basically go ahead and look at some of the core elements of classes and objects. And in this chapter, we will discuss about Java class structure. We will discuss about the structure of a class in Java and also look at visibility modifiers. Before going ahead with the Java programming and implementing or learning object-oriented programming in Java, it is important to understand classes and objects, and it is important to understand the Java class structure. So what is a class in general? So let's look at it. Class is nothing but a blueprint of an object. It is basically a template from which objects are created. For example, let's take a class called employee. So employee is a class which is defined or which is used to define employee objects. I can create multiple employee objects using one single employee class, which is nothing but a template. Okay. So you have each employee object containing an attribute of a particular employee and certain methods of employee. Each employee object will contain these particular constructs. So that's the basic concept of what a class is all about, where a class will contain the attributes and methods or behaviors of a particular entity. So that's the basic elements of class. So where you have the Java class structure, where it will contain attributes, constructors, methods. So let us explore what is an attribute in general. So an attribute is nothing but a variable or some data which defines a particular object. For example, let us take an employee. An employee will have certain attributes. An employee can have an attribute like name. It can have an attribute like login name, which is basically used, or username, which is used by the employee to log into the system. And an employee can have an employee identifier number, employee ID. So like that, these are all the variables or attributes which is actually declared in the class and defined, and when you create an object, you actually give the real value. Getting it? So you might represent the template saying that employee has an attribute first name, employee has an attribute last name. But when you actually create an object of type employee, you would basically give the name to that employee object and provide the real world data. For example, first name is John, the last name is Smith. So this is the actual data that you provide to define a particular object or to create an instance of a particular object from a class, and that is what is known as state. State of an object is nothing but the data which is present in that particular object. And the attributes can be of different types. It can be numeric, like for example, it can have an employee can have a numeric number like employee ID, numeric, characters like strings or any other objects also. So one class can also contain other classes. For example, an employee works in a particular department. So department is another object where it is referencing. So there are different elements where we bring in the concept of a model where one class can be also interacting with other classes also. Then how do you construct a class? So for which we do have something called as constructors. So constructor is a very important element in the structure of a class. So it is basically the code used for constructing a new object where it will initialize the fields of a particular class or initialize the attributes. So attributes, variables of a class, or fields of a class, these are all interchangeably used in object-oriented programming. And methods are nothing but the actions or behaviors which are exposed by a particular class or what objects expose in general. So there are different behaviors. For example, a dog has a behavior where it will bark. Alright, so that's a simple example of a behavior exposed by a particular class. Now, when you talk about these methods, attributes and constructors, there are visibility modifiers as well, where you can define whether it is publicly available, anybody can access that, or is it protected or private. So that's the basic concept where you can encapsulate certain things. Say for example, if you have an account in a bank and you have an ATM card, you don't display the ATM card and ATM card pin to the entire world. It is private. Do you agree? So it is hidden, or you encapsulate that information, and that is what is the concept of encapsulation even in an object-oriented programming. And a class encapsulates certain data, and this encapsulation is achieved using private variables or private methods. So that's the basic concept of a keyword in Java, which is reserved for private. Okay, so which means it can be accessed only from inside the class. Okay, something which can be exposed to anyone. For example, you have an identity card. You are working in a company, so you have to flash your ID card and probably you have to wear your ID card. So it is publicly available. A waiter in a hotel will have their name, right? So you can directly call them by their name, and it is basically publicly available. So that's a simple example where public attribute or public behaviors which can be accessed from anywhere. So that's another important element that we see. And then certain things are protected. So you have the ATM pin which can be private, or you might tell to your children. For example, I'm just giving an example where I'm aged and I cannot basically manage all these things. So I give certain authority, I give certain elements and pass on some information. These are my bank account. You should please go and inquire about this bank account and come back. So I give the account details to my child. So that's a simple example where it's a protected information, and protected means it can be accessed only from inside the class and its subclasses. So that's a basic concept. So a class can have child class, or a class can have parent class. So just like how we have a parent and child relationship in human beings, same concept is available even in classes and objects. So these are the three types of access modifiers what we have, or visibility modifiers. And in Java, we do have another option where you can declare a method or an attribute even without giving any of the three keywords. For example, where it is empty. So if you don't specify anything, in Java especially, it provides package level access, which means all classes well within that particular package can access those variables or can access those specific methods. So that's another visibility modifier we see in Java. So to summarize, we see that there are attributes and methods which can be public or private. So this is most commonly used. Okay, and then we do see that attributes, so we have violating encapsulation, directly exposing attributes as a public variable is not recommended as a best practice in Java. If you have a constant, you can expose, but exposing a variable to the public is not really good practice. So generally we say enforce encapsulation by protecting that and making it as a private attribute. And then coming to the methods, exposing the services of a particular class or an object to the external world is what is a public method in general. A public method of say an entity like a car. Okay, you have a car. So car exposes a behavior called start. So anybody can start the car by, like say, pressing the button, for example. So we say starting the car. A car has started, right? So that is what is exposing the services, right? You can stop the car. So it's a public method. It's not an internal method, right? And the internal methods of a car means when you actually press the button to start the car, what actually happens internally? Internally, the engine is started. And before the engine actually starts, there is a fuel pump. Fuel pump will take the fuel from the petrol or a diesel tank, for example, from the gas tank, and then supplies that particular thing to the pump, and then there is something called as an ignition that would come into picture. These are all nothing but certain behaviors that actually happens when you externally press the button, right? That is nothing but internal behaviors of a particular class, which can be private methods of a class. So these are the different visibility modifiers that we basically have in Java. So this is about the Java class structure. In the next chapter, we will discuss about the elements of a class and look at the details of what are the elements that are there, and we'll take a deep dive. So see you in the next chapter.